Love that ominous voice. So once they start speaking, I will beg all of you to please be on mute. And that way the Zoom window will focus on the speaker and it'll show up better when we put it on YouTube later. Feel free to stay up on cam or off cam. That part doesn't matter. But once the speakers start speaking, please remain on mute. And that way the window will stay focused on our speaker. So that being said, our first speaker of the evening, and he is here, I think he was one of the first ones here, is Mr. Richard Whittington. So glad to have him. Richard has lived in Memphis his entire life, except for 1 year in England, pretty cool, and 6 years in NYC. He has a degree in history from the University of Memphis here, so he is a Tiger. So sorry, go Bulldogs. And he learned how to code during the pandemic with resources like Udemy, Tech 901, and the very famous 100 Devs Bootcamp. Everybody loves Leon. So tonight, Richard's going to be speaking with us about how not to build a starter portfolio website. And with that, Richard, I'm going to step down and the floor is yours. Feel free to rock. And
Okay. Hey, my name is Richard, and just a fair warning, anyone who's experienced, you can probably take a break right now because this is very basic, but I just wanted to share a lesson that I've recently learned. And that's that it's best, when you're starting out, you want a portfolio website to show off what you can do. And there might be a tendency to make it complicated. And I tried that and it didn't really work, but I went simple, and I think that's the best way to go. And let me see if I can share my screen here. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep, looking good, Richard.
Okay, so this was my first attempt. I thought I should have all the bells and whistles, and to try to wow potential employers. But honestly, after several weeks of working on it, I'm still tinkering. I just Googled some sample portfolio websites and found one I liked. In addition to HTML and CSS, I also used Node and EJS, not for any really good reason. And that was part of the problem, I think. I concentrated too much on making the site. I should have spent more time working on the projects. So, I don't think it looks that bad, really. It's just that it has everything you need. It's just too complicated. What I ended up going with was something like this, very simple. It's actually a template. And I know that some people don't like templates because they think maybe it's cheating, but I figure, I could build this if I wanted to. And so it's nice, it's easy. I did have to mess with it a little bit to make it more responsive. But, it gets the job done. I think that a good portfolio website should showcase your skills, demonstrate that you can create a function and appealing website. It should have a good user experience, very easy to use, user-friendly. Its load time should be as fast as possible because, if you're opening a website, it takes too long, you're going to go out. You're not going to wait for it to load. So, and also that if it takes longer to load, it can affect the SEO, It's easier to maintain. And, it's a simple website can help you showcase your skills, create a positive user experience, improve load time, and make maintenance easier. Plus, it allows you more time to work on your projects to show your actual skills. And by the way, the summary that I just said, A lot of it came from ChatGPT, so that's another tool that you can use. And well, I think that's about it. Here's the code for why
Fantastic.
you.
Oh, sorry. Were you still going?
No.
Okay, sorry about that. You caught me mid-shoot. He's like, that's it. I'm like, whoa, I'm just finishing up my catfish. Excellent. Thank you for that, Richard. Let me tell you how nerve-wracking it is to do the first one, and you just knocked that out the park. So I appreciate your presence, man. And here's what we're going to do, everybody. We will take up to 3 questions per speaker in the interest of time. That way, if you have like a burning question, we can get it out. We're not going to go all night because we have on the lineup at least 7 speakers. We want to kind of keep things moving. So I'm just going to go in order of hands. Anyone has a question or anything they want to share for Richard? And I'll just go by hands. Coriano, I see you. Go ahead.
Hey, great job. A question for you. What was the most challenging part of building your portfolio website?
You mean the second one, the simple one?
Either one. I'm just curious. Yeah, I'm always curious about challenges.
Well, I guess figuring out what projects I needed and also figuring out how to customize the template for what I wanted and what I wanted to look like, how to represent myself.
Nice. Any other questions for Richard or comments? Positive only, by the way, or I'll kick you out. That's how nice I'll be to you. All right, going once, going twice. Richard, again, great job, man. Thanks so much. Really
Thank you.
appreciate that. We're going to keep this ball moving. Next, we have Tanika Blair. Nika is so first of all, y'all buckle in because I asked everybody to give me like 4 or 5 sentences of a bio. She gave me an essay. So I'm going to read I was kidding. I'm going to read really fast. But Nika is a military spouse and mother of 4 kids ranging from 1 to 12, whom she and her husband homeschool. She currently volunteers her time as a developer advocate for software engineers, and she's doing a capstone project with mentors and teammates to create a web application using Next.js. She's excited to be able to break into tech with her first full-time role as a software engineer, and she's passionate about making beautiful things with code that change the world and impact others for good. Tonight, Tanika, or Nika as we call her, will be talking about what is React. Nika, floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Is that okay? I just have a couple of slides I wanted to share. That's all right.
Absolutely.
Okay. See if I can get it.
I think you muted yourself, Nika. Your slides look good, but I think you muted yourself.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Lovely.
Okay. All right. So my talk is going to be on what is React. And so React is an open source library for JavaScript, and basically it's supposed to help developers be able to become more efficient with their code so that they're able to basically build applications efficiently and faster to be able to produce a quicker MVP. And it has pre-written and reusable parts of code. And it was created in 2011 by Facebook. And it helps developers be able to make more complex and dynamic user interfaces. I'm trying to move forward. I hope it lets me. There it goes. Okay, good. And it was created by Jordan Walk in 2011. It also uses something called imperative type of programming. And this just helps you not to have to get down to such a granular level to be able to produce something that you want the computer to do for you. The next slide I have is about how React is loved. It's loved by developers because it's really quick. Like I said, it's versatile, and something else that's really cool about it is composable. And basically, what that means is it's like you take little pieces of code or functions and React, and you can basically make little pieces of it to be reused in different areas of your application instead of you having to like do it over and over and over again, which just makes it a lot faster for you to be able to bring something to production. And it also uses something called JSX, which is like an HTML syntax, which I think is really cool because it's taking that concept of HTML, but it's making it even better where you can use something called a virtual DOM, and it uses objects. It's just really cool. It's another way of thinking about programming. I'm still getting used to React, but I really, really, really enjoy it. Another thing that makes React so cool is that pages are able to load faster. And so, like, for instance, it's really, really good when it comes to SEO because your page loads are so quick. And there are a couple of things that are cons when it comes to React. One of the cons is it's not as efficient as doing imperative programming. And it also won't help you if it's server side. For instance, you'd have to use like a framework like Next.js, which would help you be able to do things on the server side. But it's great when it comes to client side. And it's got a very lively and wonderful community of developers. And the documentation is really, 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 really good. So in conclusion, what is React? It's a powerful and popular library for building user interfaces for web applications, and it is component-based architecture with a virtual DOM and a really large and lively community that make it a great choice for building scalable and maintainable applications. And that is it. Thank you.
Nice. Give it up for Nika. Appreciate that. Me being more of an Angular guy myself, I appreciate the exposure to React. Thank you. And I neglected to mention earlier, Nika is actually our most recent volunteer leader. So we're really happy of her coming on board and taking over a lot of the social media. She's already posting on LinkedIn for us. We're looking forward to getting her the Twitter credentials and probably Meetup as well. So thanks for that. So just like we did with Richard, we'll take up to 3 questions or comments for Tanika. And I'll just go by a show of hands. Victoria, I see your hand. Feel free to jump in there.
I had a question for Nika on a personal level, if you don't mind me asking.
I'll let her approve or disapprove of that.
Yeah, that's
I don't know which direction this is going to go, so I got my finger on
no.
the kick out button.
No. As a woman in tech, do you feel any kind of, any different? Does anyone treat you differently? Or because that's kind of something I was worried about getting into tech and seeing you, a woman, a Black woman, especially, getting in tech. Are you comfortable in it? Do you feel like, there's a little pushback on your side or on the other side, or do you know what I mean?
So forgive me, but everything kind of like just froze. So I jumped in on my phone. So I only got part of what you said. Do you mind repeating that one more time? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was saying as a woman in tech, do you feel like you're treated differently or not taken seriously, or because that was something I was kind of worried about when I got into tech, because it is a male dominant career. So I was trying to on your level.
Well, I mean, I'm still trying to get a full-time job. I'm excited. I'm looking for that. But with the things I've done as far as interacting with the community, I mean, sure, you're going to always have a couple of people that are, not going to be very welcoming. But overall, I would say that most people have been very helpful. They have greeted me with open arms. Um, I think it also helps when you find a group of people that you feel safe with. That, for instance, I feel like I can make mistakes with this group of people, and they're not just going to sit there and judge me or laugh at me or point fingers at me. They really do truly want me to do the best and be the best that I can. And when you find that, I think that that's something that you should hold on to. And, you know, as far as it being a male dominated field, yes, I mean, it is, but the way I see it is somebody has to be able to be the trailblazer. So why not me? And there aren't that many women that are in tech, let alone women that are minorities. I actually have a mentor that I follow. Her name's Arit, and she is a Black woman that is currently working in tech. And I look to her as a source of inspiration for me because she's done it. And so if she can do it, I know that I can do it. But I would just say, I would just encourage you that though it may not be very many females in tech, let alone Black females in tech, there are other people behind you that might be looking for exactly what you're looking for. And so, yes, you might get some pushback, but it's worth it to me because I know people are coming behind me. And so it's not just about me, it's about other people. And so I kind of keep that as my North Star, my guiding light, if you want to say that. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you so much. That was
You're
great.
welcome.
I appreciate it. I really do.
Oh, sure, no problem.
Great question, great answer. Justin, I see your hands up.
Yeah, just a comment. I really like the pros and cons. You went over with JavaScript. I thought it was really cool just to hear how the pros of it as well as the cons, and also to talk about the community within like the JavaScript. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Justin. And you all can drop your hands back down if you don't mind. That way I won't accidentally call you twice. Greg, did you want to jump in there with a little something? I think you had a comment about React.
Oh, sure. So I just wanted to mention real quick, if anybody hasn't heard of server components yet, the new React documentation has been published, and they're going all in. It would seem with Next.js and Vercel. So anybody that's interested in React, I would encourage you to just take a look at the new docs and yeah, check out server components. That's all. Thank y'all.
Awesome, man. Appreciate that. Thank you. All right, let's keep this party going. Nika, again, great job. Was that your first tech talk of any type anywhere?
My second ever.
Second. Okay, cool. You handled it flawlessly. So proud of you.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, next up, you're most welcome, and thank you for coming. So next up, we'll have Joseph Raynovic. Joseph, getting your slides together. Joseph has been a developer for just over 2 years after previously being an automotive mechanic for far too long. That sounds like me. If he's not writing code, he's probably chasing his 2 kids and their Newfoundland dog somewhere around the Puget Sound. He loves the challenge and pushes himself to live as far outside of his comfort zone as he can. And I'm super happy about Joseph just being active in the Slack. He talks and asks questions and contributes on a very regular basis, and that helps keep the thing alive. So I appreciate that. Tonight, Joseph will be sharing with us better API design with OpenAI. Joseph, floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you. I got to get everything set up here. It's my first time doing any of this stuff on a Mac. So I've been putting this together while I'm at work. Don't tell my boss. All right. Y'all able to see the, oh, I can't see your screen.
Not yet.
Okay, can't see my screen yet?
Not yet. Still looking at happy faces.
At least they're
Mhm.
bases.
Exactly. I've
How's that?
experienced the other side. There you go. You're good to go, man.
All right, now all I gotta do is find my mouse. Okay, so howdy everyone, I'm Joseph. I'm a developer over at Seven Hills Technology where I really do a lot of consultancy work and boutique applications. My latest project I did, I kind of got thrust into Open API. And despite all the head scratching I kind of did picking it up, I quickly learned a lot of the benefits that it provides. So by the end of this, I hope to give you kind of a cursory glance of Open API and hopefully pique your interest enough to give it a try. So we'll start with what is Open API, why API design is important and how Open API helps, some Open API features, and then I'll close with a couple additional Open API tools and resources. So Open API really just allows us a way to standardize how we describe our APIs that is language agnostic. It makes it a lot easier for developers to understand how to use them. Also allows developers to generate documentation automatically just based off the specification you create. Open API also provides one single language for API design, allowing different teams and stakeholders to collaborate on development. It has a wide range of tooling available as well as a large community. And just recently, I've been using Open API to generate TypeScript files directly from the Open API specification, which has been an absolute lifesaver. And this is an example of an Open API YAML file. And this is kind of the specification you end up writing. This is kind of a simple route. And as you can see, there's parameters, descriptions, responses, everything you need to know about the API is right there in that YAML. Before we even write our API, we can plan our API and how it should behave. Greatly streamlines development by giving developers a blueprint and clear expected behavior of what the API should do. It enforces consistency and quality in providing a common language to build and maintain APIs. And I swear, if all documentation is kind of a pain, comes with its own learning curve. And the next time I hop into a project with Open API, I would be pretty excited and probably rocking and rolling right away. So how can API help with Open API help with all this? Usability. This can really make our API easier to understand, making it more likely that other developers are going to want to use it. Helps with scalability. Means we can handle increased traffic and usage over time without becoming bogged down or breaking. Gives us a chance to really think about security and plan it out and take all those things into consideration before we even start writing code. This big one is consistency. If you've worked on a team with other developers, it can be hard to figure out who's doing what and when. And Open API really gives us a consistent structure and behavior. That way we can kind of do a lot of cross collaboration. The last one is developer experience. It just makes it a lot easier and more fun to work with if you understand what's going on and why. So Open API has some really cool tools available. You have Swagger UI, which this is an example of the Swagger UI you can generate directly from that specification. And you can go right into the browser in development mode and pull this up so you can see exactly what the API expects. And you can even test it right here in the browser. And you can also see the responses. You can generate TypeScript files like I talked about earlier. All the types for the current project we're working on were generated with Open API, and it's pretty awesome. There's also some other cool tools like Spectral, which is a linting tool, and it helps give you a chance to validate common errors and check over your API for best practices. It's probably better to catch all that before you get building. So I want to say thanks so much for everybody listening to me today, tonight, or wherever you are, and I really hope you take some time to look further into Open API and possibly use it in your next project. Also, I'm praying for most of you in Memphis there that the Grizzlies take the win, and let's go Suns.
You got to beat the referees first.
That's
Great
a hard
job,
one to
Joseph.
do.
I know. Great job, Joseph. Thank you so much for that. I now fear I emphasize the time too much because you guys are going blazingly fast. Like we're just whipping through these, but great job. API is one of those subjects that I think needs to be emphasized way more in boot camps than they are. It's kind of like they gloss over it, and then you end up getting hit with it in the real world. Nevertheless, questions and comments for Joseph. Feel free to throw those hands up.
This is a
Then-
comment. I have a
Go ahead,
quick
Justin.
comment. So I have a story right now with an API I'm doing with work, and Swagger I am just using it for the first time. I literally just started using it last week on Thursday, and we just went over how to like go over it in the basics of it. And it's kind of cool seeing that you had it mentioned in your presentation. However, I am still very new to the API, the story I'm doing right now, I guess. So I thought it was just really cool that you mentioned it.
Cool.
Oh, yeah. Crazy how it came back to me, I guess.
Yeah, Swagger, I believe, is Swagger and OpenAPI have teamed up now or absorbed each other in some way, shape, or form. I'm not exactly sure on the absolute specifics of that, though.
So I have a question, and I was hoping you could say more about having
Hey,
open.
Eric, I
Yep.
hate to be a pain, but Karen actually had her hands up. She was being
Oh, my
polite. So do you
bad.
mind if we go over
No,
there
dude.
first?
No, dude.
All right. Thanks, man.
Hey, so sorry. Good job, Joseph and Nika. This is my first one coming here. Great job. So did you say you were a mechanic before this, Joseph?
I was.
Do you mind if I ask when you switched careers? How long ago?
It was just over 2 years ago.
Okay.
And no,
there's
it
hope.
wasn't really because of it really wasn't because of the pandemic, because I worked through the whole, I guess the pandemic put it in perspective, but I did work through the whole thing. So that had an impact, but not like I was sitting at home hanging out like a lot of people were.
Yeah. What did you do for your education?
I went to a boot camp mostly as a way to kind of bolster my own self-confidence. Most of my learning took place before and after that.
Okay. Thank you.
That
And
just
then
has me
Eric's going to throw
curious.
the hardball question at me.
I know, right? That just has me curious. So if everybody could hear me, if you are a career changer or you will be a career changer into tech, just throw up any emoji you want. You can hit the reaction button, raise a hand, anything. Let me just see how many career changers do we have. Lots of folks. Okay, this is my people. All right, cool. Cool. So many
Oh, and
awesome
I've got a
success
story for you,
stories.
Lawrence.
Oh,
I've got
really?
a quick story for you.
Shoot, you
So
still
I
got the
asked
floor,
about a
man.
bike. All right, I asked about a bike last week, an exercise bike for at my standing desk. Ended up buying one off Facebook from an older gentleman, and we were chatting about our knees hurting, carrying it to my car, and he's wanting to switch to UI UX design. So while I'm in Bremerton, Washington, I was saying, well, I sent him a link to Code Connector, and I was like, I hope I see you there. So we might hopefully have a new person joining.
Nice. Now y'all are recruiting for us too. See, this is awesome. Appreciate that, man. Any final questions or comments for Joseph? APIs.
Okay, so here we are. No. It's not hard. So I'm gonna tell you my experience with Open API Swagger has always been sort of the other way around, where you like write code and do like the documentation comments and have it generate the Open API spec from that. So I was just wondering if you could, say a little bit more about the workflow of, writing out your spec and then having it generate code for you. Like that just sounds too cool.
Oh, yeah. So the recent project I worked in, so here's where I kind of got thrown into it, is I tried to write an API, and every time you go to run it, it reruns a code generator, and then my types go away. And then you try to hit the API in Postman, and it tells you the route doesn't exist. I'm sitting here screaming at the screen like, the route exists. I just wrote it. I'm literally looking at it. After I got the hang of it, you plan out your route. You kind of take an extra couple minutes to plan out what you're going to do. You write it in that YAML file, and from there you can just write a simple script and run. In this case, it's like npm run OpenAPI generate, and it will go and take all the query parameters, responses, and everything, and generate all those types in TypeScript. Because if you look at those parameters, it takes in, let's say it's an object with an array of strings, and you write that in there. Well, suddenly in your TS file, you're going to have all that listed out in a type, and it may be, like in this case, it was like property report response or property report record, and it was going to be an array of all these objects. So that was kind of the workflow that I got started working with on OpenAPI. You're on mute.
That's really neat. Thank you, sir.
I said 3, but I will allow one last one. Michael Blackmer, did you have a question, or was that an accidental hand raise?
I was gonna just mention, I guess I was reading some of the documentation really quick for Open API. So it's just written in the YML file. So I use like C Sharp, ASP.NET for my backend for projects. Now just exploring that. So I guess I could use, so it uses Swagger in I think in the main setup file there. So I guess I just need to read into it, but I think you kind of answered my question earlier. So that's why I kind of dropped my hand. So it's just something I need to read like documentation on how to implement it into my projects, but it seems pretty cool.
And that's one of the neat things about it is even if you're in C# and we're working together and I'm over here in Node, we could work cross collaborate on that API in that YAML file. Or I mean, you can use JSON too, but we don't. That's kind of the benefit of it being language agnostic, is everybody can collaborate. Even a stakeholder can quickly pick up how that YAML file is structured, and they can also kind of come into it and say, hey, I recommend this, I recommend that. They don't need to understand whatever backend framework we're using. They just need to understand that simple YAML file.
And that YAML file is basically setting the parameters of like the requests going back and forth between client side and server side, right? Very cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Getting in the weeds here. I love it. I love it. This is what we do.
Yeah. I'll just pop in and say that all of Microsoft's SDKs are like their clients are all written in Swagger. So it's for all the languages. Yeah, and they just deploy those.
Nice. Appreciate that, man. Joseph, great job, man. Looking forward to you speaking on the next one. Let's have you on a night by yourself because you've got more to say. That being said, next up to the mic is Mr. Coriano Harris, straight out of San Diego, California. Coriano is a techie who has been specializing in UX research, UI design, and software development for over 6 years. He lends his toolbox of skills in the fintech, healthcare, automotive, parcel, and entertainment industry. He's all over the place. When he isn't displaying acts of service, you'll find him screaming at someone to pass him the soccer ball while he's getting crushed by the San Diego Waves. I guess that's a soccer team. Coriano is going to be speaking on Shut the Hooks Up.
Yes.
It must be React again. It's a React kind of night. And also, Coriano is one of our volunteer leaders as well with Code Connector. He's headed up the UX UI meetup that we have every third Friday, give or take.
It's every third to fourth Friday of the month where we focus on UX.
We're actively looking for people to partner with him who are experienced in that and can reliably show up once a month, every month, and help him run those Zooms. So for now, Corey, you got it.
Thank you. Thank you once again. My name is Coriano. I'm sunny San Diego. Let me share my screen. Okay. And let me know if you guys can see my screen.
You good?
Okay,
Good to
perfect.
go.
Awesome. Let's remove this. Okay, so I just built a quick React application to kind of talk about hooks. So my talk is Shut the Hooks Up, where I'm focusing on kind of 4 hooks that you typically experience when you're either using React as far as building something or kind of looking at a current React application, at least in my experience. So first, just quickly wanted to talk about what React hooks are. So they're basically functions that allow functional components to be able to have class-like experience. So meaning they'll kind of have that similar life cycle and be able to access state, because functions traditionally can't access state. And this was implemented in version 16.80. So if you have a previous one, you wouldn't be able to have this experience. And then what's great about hooks is that it allows us now to have an easier way to reuse stateful logic between components, which was really challenging before when you had class-based components. And then there's 3 rules that are typically kind of with hooks. One is that hooks can only be used in React functional components. You have to place hooks at the top level. That's where they need to be called at. And then lastly, hooks cannot be conditional. So you can't do if, use state, whatever value you have, then do this. And so those are kind of the 3 rules around how to utilize hooks. So first, I'm going to talk about use state. So useState is a hook that allows us to be able to create state variables in a React functional component. What's awesome about this, it allows us to access, update, even store values within that component, even over time. So here's an example here where I have a button that has update show. And then I'm currently showing about value of Mandalorian, which is one of my favorite shows. And then when I click on this button, now it's updated to Ted Lasso, which is currently my other favorite show that I've been watching. Those are the two shows I've been really enjoying lately. And so here's a snippet of the code to kind of implement that experience. So here we want to pass in that or import in the use state from React. These are, I like style components, so don't really worry about that. I'm importing some style components. And then here's the functional component here, where it's a use state component. And then as I mentioned before, you want to place the hook at the top level. And so you'll see here that we've got the use state. And so I'll kind of break that down here. So use state typically takes 2 arguments. It doesn't have to, it can just take 1, but it does have to have the variable, which you can name it anything you want. So here I've got it named show. And then second one, we typically add set in front of it. So we typically keep the same word and add set. So here I have set show, and that is like a function that's going to update the state from the default state here of Mandalorian to the updated state Ted Lasso. So here I've got a function where I'm setting and updating that. And then in the return of the component, I've got an on-click here where that's getting updated. So that's where you're seeing that here. So just kind of a quick with state, use state, it just allows us to be able to access state variables. So that's one really useful hook that you'll experience a lot. The next one is use effect hooks. So what they do is they allow us to perform actions each time a functional component renders. It also helps us to be able to deal with side effects. So in case you don't know what side effects is, it's basically things that we have no control over outside world. So one is APIs, like we can't control whether the server is going to be down, what the status is that's going to return, also working with the virtual DOM. And that's is where this comes into really, really helpful. So once again, here we're importing that use effect in here. I've got use state. Here's my component. What I'm doing this time is setting the use state value to an empty array and then use effect. So use effect can it takes basically 2 arguments. One is a function and the other one is an array. So in this case here, I'm doing a fetch to get this API. And then I'm getting that returned, and then I'm updating the, and I'm sorry if I'm going a little too fast, please let me know if you need me to slow down, but I'm basically grabbing, getting the response, passing it into here, and then updating this array, the dog image array, with this new value in here. And then the second part of it is really interesting because this is where it's actually looking for dependencies, things that it watched before it re-renders. And so if you leave it empty, it's only going to render 1 time on the initial load, which is what I wanted in this case. But if there are values that you need to be watched and you want the page to re-render, whether that is like, you know, a user object and they change their job title, this is where you can pass that variable in there. And it's going to basically watch for that. And when that does update, then it's going to re-render the page. And then down here, just say return here, just so in case here people want to see it, just here I'm doing a conditional, seeing if that's true, and then I'm mapping through that and then displaying the picture up here. I just chose one just for simplicity. So that's the great thing about use effect. It allows you to handle side effects. It allows you to kind of control when you want certain things to be called. It also helps with making sure that the page renders, because if you were to call an API before the component renders, it would actually have to wait for that to complete and then render the page. So this allows for everything to render and then for you then to go and grab the data information that you need to display. Okay, and the next one is use ref. So use ref is like a special attribute. It allows you to be able to get references to a given element or component. And so here's an example here where I've got an input field, which is one of the use cases for use refs. And now I'm going to click on this button because I want that to be focused. So now this is focused. And so the code down here, what it's doing is importing the user ref hook. Then we are doing here, I'm using TypeScript, so this is just kind of helping with the type, but basically I've set this to null. And then here in the code, in the button, I'm running a function here where I am, sorry, the input field here is where I'm placing that ref. So every element has a ref attribute. And so this way, this input is connected here. And so when I call this, or my function returns, it's going to look for this, which is assigned to this input field. Then it's going to check to see if it's active. And if it's active, then it's going to focus. So this is now it's focused. If I click outside, it's no longer active. And so that's one thing that's really good about use ref. It just allows us to be able to, once again, reference and get access to certain components within a return, or even, like I said, a component or an element. And that's been really helpful, especially with forms, for being able to focus for users to know that which input field that they're currently working on. And then lastly is use context. So this hook is really used for global state. It allows you to be able to, basically, if you have state props that multiple components are going to be utilizing, this use context would allow you to be able to have that global state so it can be shared. Previously, you had to do what we call prop drilling, which basically manually you had to pass down the prop or value in nested. So if you had a parent, you had a child, and then you had and then that child was a parent of another one, you would actually have to pass it down into 3 of those components for for the grandchild to have access to it. And we use context allows us to be able to get access to that value without having to prop down. So in this case here, I'm going to just go to the code real quick to update this welcome. You'll see Fred. And then if I go to here, I'm going to update that to JC. Okay, and so now it's updated to JC. And so here's kind of how this code works, because this is actually nested inside another function. Sorry, another component, not function. So here's a breakdown. We're going to pass in use state, create context. Use context to create that object here. We need to assign that to a variable. So here we're creating this use context object, which will give us access to some other properties that we want to utilize. And so next here, we're creating that functional component. Once again, here is a state, and I don't need to have that set because that's going to be handled through the context. So here's use state, an example where you don't have to have the set user. And then when I'm returning here, I'm doing a provider, which is basically the parent. And then you pass in the value that you want your siblings or children inside of this provider to have access to. And so in this case, I've got a main, and then I've got 2 other functional components here. The header one is here, and that's getting passed into the main. So that one is nested. And because of using the provider, this header is going to be able to get access to the user value here. There is one thing in here that I just noticed. So with function components, if you don't have children, you do not have to have both of those up. You would typically just have it similar to this way as this header for this main one. And so that's the great thing about use context. It just allows you to have global state. It allows your to share state, it's allow for nested components to get access to it without having to manually pass those props into each of the components until it gets to the component that it needs. And then lastly, just some other additional hooks. Here, like we have use reducer, which is really helpful with like state management. So if you use Redux, use reducer is another option. Use callback allows you to kind of cache or store like a function's value, which is really helpful. So instead of it having to execute it again, it could just grab that. The same with use memo. This is towards values. Do the similar thing where you can cache values and it can just basically call that. And what's awesome about these two is it also eliminates re-rendering. So it won't have to re-render when that particular function is called or when that value is called within using the use memo. I have never had to use this one. Use layout is with styling. There's a debugging one. There's the deferred value where you're waiting for some value to come. So this is an option if that's something that you're looking where you don't need the value right away, but you know eventually you will need it or eventually the value will be cached. Then you've got use transitions, which is for animation, and then you have a use ID, which I've never used. And then there's also some other library hooks here. So just kind of wanted to show you the additional built-in hooks that you can take advantage of. And last but not, you can create custom hooks. The only thing with that is that you want to make sure that you have use, you want to start whatever your identifier is for that hook with the word use. And what that says is kind of a quick overview of hooks. And yeah, I'm done.
Nice. Coriano comes with the lectures. I hope y'all are taking notes. Great job, man, as always. Questions, comments for Coriano? Victoria, I see your hand. Go for it.
I actually have a question this time. I actually have two. Not a question, a comment, I'm sorry. So when you were going through your code, I was honestly very impressed just because right now I'm in a certificate pathway for front end. And I just learned array or nested array and all of that with JavaScript. And I can actually, for the most part, understand what your code is. So I'm very impressed by that. And also, I really appreciate you for coming out and showing the code just because I can actually see the big picture instead of smaller and syntax of the big picture. That's the problem that I'm in right now, where I don't know what I'm doing with it. They were just telling me to do it. I'm just doing it. You know what I mean? So I can actually see the big picture. So that's really helpful for me to see that.
I'm glad I was able to help. Thank you.
Was that both comments, Victoria? You said you had two.
Yes, that was both comments.
You're good. Okay. Just don't want to shortchange you. You might talk about me. Anyone else? Questions, comments for Coriano? You stunned the men. Michael Blackmer, jump in there. Excuse me, Blackmer, jump in there.
Thanks, Lawrence. Man, I just want to say that was a really awesome talk there, and enjoyed looking at your code and how you went through those hooks. Well, with that comment said, with that use ID hook, I think that was just implemented in in the newer release of React.
Okay.
Just for anybody interested, it's pretty useful as far as for custom, not having the error. I forget what the error throws for getting custom IDs. I think React throws an error when you're sorting through an array or through objects.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Creating them. So I think they implemented that for you to be able to get the, just custom random unique IDs, and it always returns in a string for your JSON format for, I guess, sending HTTP requests. Okay. But yeah, everything you went through, those hooks were super helpful. I just want to say thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yeah, I learned about that too. I didn't know about the use ID that much, but thank you. It's gonna be interesting to check out.
Karen, you can go ahead.
I put it in the chat too. So I'm pretty dang new to coding. What is the best way for a noob to learn about React, get started?
At first, I would just say you have hair, so that's going to be a little challenging because I want to pull my hair out all the time in React. for at least the first 3-4 years. But I would say getting comfortable with JavaScript, because you're using JavaScript in React. You know, the syntax might be different, but under the hood, it's React. So that was something that was recommended to me before I dived into React, was to get comfortable with JavaScript. And then from there, it's there's some cool people to follow, like Ken Dobbs. I follow him religiously. Dan Abruz, I follow him as well. And those are really some good people to kind of help with that. And yeah, just the beginning is just kind of reading the documentation. I love like the understanding the why and going under the hood of things. So documentation is really, really crucial for me in my learning process. And then just kind of connecting with other people, and then, you know, building some stuff on your own. So like I said, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm in Co-Connector. You know, if you want, like, I think if you want access to what I did, because I did it in React, so it's my local environment, but yeah, we can always talk after that if you have some questions, or if there's anything from the slide that you like for me to get to.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
Not that you asked me, but I've heard very good things about running master's React curriculum as well.
Yep, it's another good one too.
Joseph, I see your hand. You'll be our last of our questions. Go for it.
All right, Coriano, when would you recommend using hooks over other state management systems? What would be kind of that boundary where you'd say, you know what, we need to switch to something like Redux or other management systems out there?
For me, it comes down to scalability in the data. If it's something that's pretty lightweight, I'd use Reducer. But if it's going to be something where it's going to be a lot of data to manage, that's where I start looking at like Redux or MobX or something like that. But use Reducer is really useful. But then, like I said, we didn't use that on a production application. So I'm not sure how many people use that on a production one, but for just like, if, you know, for something that's lightweight, I would definitely lean towards use Reducer for that.
Cool, thanks.
Oh, you're welcome.
Fantastic. Thank you, Coriano, once again for awesome presentation.
Oh, you're
Bringing
welcome.
us up on game with the front end. We appreciate that as always. All right, folks, we are down to our last 3 speakers of the evening. How's everybody feeling? Are we good? We're cranking here. We're just cranking with information. And let me just point out 2 of our final speakers, as well as Coriano and JC, who's over there and quietly. These are all volunteer leaders for Code Connector, and they've stepped up and they raised their hand to come speak for us tonight. I really appreciate that. But please know, ideally, we are really wanting to pull from the community, people who are brand new or experienced, and hear from you all, because all of these folks work hours every week putting together their different meetups and programming for free. It's like we have no pay structure. They're doing this out of the goodness of their heart. So this is extra about what they already do. So to Corey, to Eric, to Nika, JC, Coriano, I think that's it. Thank you. Thank you for coming in and speaking and helping out and just being the awesome people that you are. You are the engine that makes this thing work, and I really appreciate that. I publicly want you to know that. All right, sappy stuff is over. Appreciate it. Sappy stuff over. Next person, loudmouth, just kidding. Next person is my friend. We used to work at FedEx together, Corey McCarthy. He's been a developer for 8 years, working mostly with Java and Spring, and most recently with AWS, JavaScript, and Vue.js. He studied computer engineering at the University of Memphis. Go Tigers. Just kidding, go Bulldogs. And he's currently a lead developer over a small team. Over the years, he has failed his fair share of interviews, and tonight he'll be talking about acing interviews. The title of his talk is How to Nail Your First Full-Time Job Interview. I'm sure we're going to have some eager ears on this one. Corey, floor is yours.
All right, thanks everybody. So I had everybody always wants to hear, oh yeah, I did this, and this, and I got a job, and it was just easy. But I know that Will Kelly works with lots of people that don't have that story. I didn't have that story. I took 10 months to find my first development job after going into computer science, transferring into computer engineering, come out with a bachelor of science in engineering, one class shy of a math degree. I thought that piece of paper was going to pay my bills. And I was sadly mistaken. I managed to not do a single internship through the entirety of my degree. And then I come to realize that internships aren't just for credits. Like, that's how you make people want to hire you. And yeah, so I had problems. I basically got hired. I thank God that these people hired me. I got hired by an on-site offshore company that basically, like, they had a quota on American employees that they had to have on their contract. So like, I could have probably been far worse and still got that job. I sat there and thought the job was going to teach me what I needed for my next job. That was another huge failure. I sat back for 3 or 4 years. I tried to interview for a bunch of jobs, just completely failed. Eventually I had to learn like what I actually needed to do. All right. First things first, if you are not on our Slack, you need to be. And when you land on that Slack, if you were looking for work, you need to be in our resume feedback channel, because I presume you've already gotten through that stuff at this point. We also have interview prep channel over there where we can dive into lots more stuff here. All right. I will be sharing a link to my article that is basically this with, actually more thought put into the specific words. But we're going to be going into the questions that you get in interviews. So there's lots of different interview processes. I'm sure you've heard about data structures and algorithms problems and take-home tests or take-home projects or leak code or all these different things. If you really want to get down deep in interview processes, there's a great book called Cracking the Coding Interview. I know that like everybody that's been in here that's been in the field for 5 years has probably read some part of this. They get into like used to be big four interview processes. You get some things where you go in, spend the whole day there, talk to everybody in the company, it feels like, and then at the end of the day, you know if you're hired. And other times we do, talk to somebody 1 week and another week and another week and another week. And I know Dennis over there is been through some pretty drawn out ones recently. We're going through can be a month or two, right? But when you finally get in there, you have to be able to communicate. The whole thing is storytelling. Your resume is storytelling. Your interview is storytelling. How you get through your first week on a job is storytelling. You have to be able to tell people what can you do. You have to have the humility to know what you can't do and the understanding of what you actually bring to the table. All right, so into the questions. This first category of questions here is going to be for general technical knowledge. So, all right, I'm a backend developer. I do work in some front end, but most of this is going to be coming from my world. These are going to be things like, how does a REST API work? What is CI/CD and why is it important? What are some basic ways to prevent application and website failure? Look, some of these things have lots of different ways you can approach the answer. You have to come from some amount of understanding of the general technology, because knowing very specific about how to do this one thing, like, that's really great for a junior developer, for a first-time developer. And if all you know is, I built this little thing right here and I would like to go do that for you, it's not terrible. I mean, everybody starts with a very specific, we need you to do this task that is very well laid out and we have someone that will help you. But as you're getting more understanding and more experience, you need to take the time to understand what's TCP/IP, what's DNS, what are the general ways that these things work. I'll give you a terrible story of how this one of such questions that I came across. I was working at FedEx. I knew absolutely nothing effectively. I'd been working for probably 2 or 3 years. I got into an interview. I saw there's one of these rooms where every wall is whiteboard. And I saw something about their stack, and they had these different spring layers in there. And I asked them what they were using spring for. And then, they told me, and I said, oh, well, we use Spring. This was horrible, horrible thing for me to do. Then they asked me if we were using Spring Framework or Spring Boot. I was like, said something like, we use Spring configuration. I had no clue. All I knew was there were some XML files over there that you didn't touch if you didn't know what you were doing. I completely flopped that. They didn't call me back. They didn't tell me I didn't get the job. They just didn't talk to me anymore. I went home. Okay, I didn't go home. I didn't go home and study. I was in a really boring job and I had lots of time on my hands. So I went all the way through. Absolutely love. There's a channel on YouTube called Java Brains. They've got a playlist for Spring Framework and another one for Spring Boot. Did every bit of that. By the time I got through it, I knew more about Spring than anybody in my organization. I was answering the seniors' questions at the end of that. But take that terrible experience of that interview, learn something about it, come out the other side better. These are the kinds of things that if somebody asked me to tell, of a tremendous failure or of something I learned on the job, that's definitely something that I could put in. And these are the things where you are trying to, through answering different bits of questions, tell how you have used something, sometimes why you know some of the things that you do. Say, oh, well, I do know that, I don't know all about CI/CD, but I know that we use Jenkins, and we just kind of pointed at GitHub. It picks up the thing. We've got, it's in our package JSON, and we tell it to run the build and push it out to Amazon. Like that's all I know. That's an understanding, and it gives you something to step on to move forward. So next comes around to some things, culture fit. All right, so in the very beginning of your career, it's going to feel very much like you need to make yourself fit into a box for your team. And I need you to understand that if you have at least 3 years experience in this field, you are interviewing that company to see if it is a culture that you would like to be in. Do not feel like you have to bend over backwards to fit into a company. Also, once you've got a couple of years under your belt, you're going to have some bad experiences from a job that you've had, and you're going to have things that you never want to have happen again. So when you come into these questions, like, what about this role appeals to you most? I really like your stack. I like the fact that, I see that you're using the Atlassian suite, and you're, using Jira, and you're using the whole flow of everything like that. I've come from somewhere where we had sticky notes on the wall and I had no clue what was going on. That's great. Bring what you know and who you are and what you're looking for to the answers. It's not just like one word answers. I would say very rarely, if ever, if you give one word answers to some of these bigger questions, they're just not going to hire you because they don't know if you know anything. They don't know if you're a good fit. And a couple more questions in culture fit would be something like, tell me a lesson you've learned from the workplace over the years, or If we asked your coworkers how they describe you, what would they say? I absolutely love this question. It's absolutely horrifying if you've never considered it before. If you have a job in tech and you don't have an answer for this question, there's really easy way to answer it. Take this question, say, how would you describe your coworker? Send it to the 5 people that you work closest with. You'll be amazed at what they tell you, because it'll be stuff that you don't know about yourself. I'm gonna move on. I've got a whole nother thing I wrote about knowing your brand. If you don't know what you bring to the table, you can't pull off an interview. You can't sell something that you don't know. Okay, well, there are some people that's just their skill set, but 99% of people can't sell something that they don't know about. I'm going to have some links. Please be in Slack. I love to get you all of this information over there where it's going to live longer than this Zoom meeting. Another classification would be something about peer interaction. Like, tell me about a time that you had a problem with a coworker and how you resolved it. What would you do if a manager assigns you a new task or project right before you're about to leave for the day? Or how do you prefer to receive feedback on your performance from your managers and peers? These are about you. They're trying to get you to talk about yourself. They're also trying to understand, do you make an effort to work with your coworkers? Do you put in the work, or do you just say, oh, well, I'm a good developer, they can live with it? Because if you are a terrible developer, but everybody likes to be around you, you can figure out how to be a good developer. If you're a great developer and nobody wants to work with you, good luck getting a paycheck for very long at all. Because people are just they're gonna be tired of your stuff and they're gonna want to move on. You're gonna be one of the ones that people are being asked about that time they had a problem with a coworker, and you're gonna be it. And it don't be that guy. I believe this oh, we got 2 more. Prior experience. So we're looking at some examples here. What's a time that you faced significant difficulty at work and how did you overcome it? How do you normally learn about new things? What kind of projects have you worked on before? These questions, if somebody hits you with one of these and you've not thought about some of these things, you will not handle it well. The more of these types of questions you look at and you plan answers to, the closer you are to having an answer ready. And be ready to, I said that we're telling a story through the entirety of the interview. The more of these answers you can tie to the same features, the same problem, the same project, whatever, the better, because you're getting a more fleshed out, solid story together. And it helps people understand more about you. And when people feel like they know who you are, they're a lot more likely to like you. If they have no clue who you are, like they sit in a room with you for an hour and they're like, I don't know who that guy was, they're not going to feel likely to want to be around you. Just don't be standoffish. Give enough information. I don't know when to shut up. You don't have to be like me, but you have to actually stand up and talk. Then we get down to the ones that most people dread. Your problem solving questions. All right. These are the really harsh ones. Implement bubble short on this very specific data. I actually had this for Amazon. Absolutely hated it. Spent over an hour working on it. How would you figure out if there was a loop in this graph structure? I know Eric Burden knows the answer. And if you've ever heard the question before, you know the answer. It's something called a tortoise and a hare. It's a stupid question. The only people that know the answer to this question are the people that have heard the question before. Look, you have to understand that the questions people ask you in interviews tell you something about them. If somebody asks you that question, I'd say, you know, I know that the answer is this, but I'm really curious as to how this actually relates to the job. Some people got the idea when Google was doing these really crazy questions 15 years ago that they needed to ask these really weird questions, these really specific questions. Most people are understanding that that's a bad idea. They're not a very good way to tell if somebody's going to be a developer. What are some ways that you can break down a very large data set so that you can analyze it? This is what I'd consider a great question. And it gives us a good jumping off point here. Whether it's one of these straightforward questions or concept questions, or whether it's a whiteboarding task. You are not a computer, and anyone that expects you to write compilable code during an interview is a pain. They don't understand the purpose of any of this. A whiteboarding interview is effectively like pair programming or mob programming, where the one with the marker in front of everybody else is like the person at the keyboard. It's not the only person working. You are going to put out most of the ideas, but one of the things you need to do is planning and talking out loud. Say, okay, I'm going to assume that the data looks like this. And I'm going to say, okay, well, we have this object that has these 3 fields, and we're going to assume that there are these data types. For the ease of approach, I'm going to assume this one's no bigger than, you know, max integer. This one's only a 16-bit or a 16-character string, whatever it is. Talk through it. Ask questions. Are these safe assumptions? Would it be okay if I assumed that I had a sort function that would do this for me in this scenario? Or do you want to see me actually do the sort? In a real world scenario, you're going to have available to you documentation, tutorials, the entirety of the internet, Stack Overflow, Code Connector. You might have Lawrence on the phone, like whatever it is, you have resources to get jobs done. Lawrence didn't look, and he didn't even flinch. You have resources at your disposal in a real world scenario. You have to understand what type of a thing you are looking for to get a job done. You don't have to know the whole answer as soon as you see it. You don't have to walk up to a typewriter and be able to put working code into it. We have good employers. I absolutely love my employer. I got a full all products bundle for JetBrains products. I've got a pro license on GitKraken, so I can work with my private repos on GitHub. I've got, if I come out with something that I need to do my job easier, I say, hey, this costs $150 a year, and I think it's worth doing. And my boss says, okay, that sounds reasonable. Let's do it. You don't have to write code and hope it compiles. Your tools should be helping you autocomplete things, because syntax should not take you all day. Your tools should fix your syntax for you. You know what, Karen, there are good jobs out there. I promise you there are. There are lots of crummy ones, but there are good jobs out there. I have absolutely no clue where I am on time. Lawrence, wave at me if I need to hurry up.
20 minutes in, brother.
20 minutes. I told you I was taking everybody else's time. All right. I finished my main sections, and I promise I'll give y'all like the much more succinct long article here. Final tips. Look, practice. You got to practice. You're not going to do it your first time. Get them out of the way. This also means apply to jobs that maybe you shouldn't apply for, that are outside your skill set or whatever they are. you are not going to do it your first time. Just get some interviews in, whether it's mock interviews, real interviews, whatever. Be prepared. You should know something about the company when you walk in. When they ask you about, what have you heard about us? Why are you excited about this? Whatever it is, know something about them. Also, know the things that you don't want to see in a job and let them guide your questions. Because when they come to the end and they say, what questions do you have for us? If you have no questions, they know that you don't have anything in your experience that you're trying to avoid, which sounds a whole lot like you don't have a lot of experience. If you have things you don't want to see happen, ask about them. You know, when an incident happens in production, how does your team go about solving it? What are the steps after that? All in all, be comfortable, talk to people, do whatever you got to do to be comfortable and understand what's going on. With that, I'm going to shut up. Thank you. If you have questions, maybe Lawrence will let you ask them.
Absolutely. Y'all go ahead and give Corey a hand. He goes in it, man. Guy's passionate about what he talks about. I get him passionate about a watch one day, but that's in the future. That's future stuff. Right now, we're dealing with his passion for tech. We'll take up to 2 questions or comments for Corey and Victoria. I see you're first. You're taking initiative. I like that. Jump in there.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I was just clapping my hands for the reaction.
Oh, virtual hands. Okay, cool. That works too. That works too.
That was
I
very
love it.
interesting. I enjoyed it. I was sitting on the edge of my seat the whole time because I really needed to hear that, you know.
Corey killing it out here. Thanks for that feedback. Coriano, I see your hand up. Go ahead, you guy.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Just wanted to give a shout out. I'm not for sure if I told Corey that, but the article was really helpful because it actually got me rethinking my resume as far as the prior experience, that formula where team X and that was really really useful for me compared to what my previous resume was. And that has been getting a lot of attention with that too, especially with the recruiters and stuff too. So I just wanted to say a shout out to you for kind of opening my eyes to that and having me kind of see the way to kind of express the value in the resume. So shout out.
That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear it.
I am on mute. There. Great question. Appreciate that. We're looking great on time. We have one final question for Corey before we go to our next speaker. Is that a hand, Eric?
I'm trying to be polite now.
Now he's
only if
hour
no
and a half
knows.
into the meeting.
Go ahead.
I saw a message from Karen. Did you have a question for me?
No, I said I like that
Oh.
you're enjoying a postdoc sucker.
Oh, okay.
We'll treat.
Yes, I'm enjoying that. It's what we do here, Kurt. It's a family environment here.
I love it.
So
Go ahead,
Corey,
Eric.
I was gonna ask, so how important in your opinion is it to engage in all of the practice things that we do over in Code Connector for interviews, the coding dojo, the challenges in code, the discussions that we're having over there? Does it help, or are we just having fun?
I want to ask somebody else. Joseph, how much help was it for you to get into Code Connector and talk to all the people when you made your last job hop?
More than there is time for me to say.
I'll say that I absolutely love the interview prep channel. I absolutely love the resume feedback channel. Me, Eric, Dennis, and a few people that I hadn't seen in a while got together a couple years ago and did this coding dojo thing, trying to help people learn to get more comfortable in their coding, people that might not feel comfortable doing coding challenges by themselves. Also, it's really helped. At least 2 people have said that it helped them be able to do coding problems in an interview after having done that. You're getting comfortable. I know Joseph, me and him got a lunch, just had lunch one day over Zoom. I mean, we're on opposite sides of the country, but over Zoom, and just talk through the experience, figure out what his relevant work experience is. Come in. When Lawrence does virtual lunch, one of the greatest times, just hop in, ask questions, talk to people about tech. It's absolutely no plans. You come in, talk with whoever, and get comfortable. That's what it's all about. That's the whole thing. I had to stop talking while Lawrence was away from keyboard.
I was gonna say, I
Yeah.
think we
You're good.
talked
You're good.
yesterday,
Strategic.
like 30 minutes or so in the virtual lunch about landing your first job and the steps you can take in your LinkedIn and how you can advertise yourself, how you can network, make real connections that'll help you grow and all that stuff. So it's good stuff.
It was. Appreciate that. That was fun too. Awesome. Corey, thanks so much for that, man. We're going to move on to the other bald head person in the room, Eric. Eric is a data services consultant with NTT Data Services, LLC, where he spends most of his day in meetings, wishing he could be writing code instead. When he is writing code, it's usually some form of data analytics, helping clients to understand and use the data they have to improve outcomes and performance. Because data can be messy and complicated, Eric spends a lot of time thinking about how to keep his code clean and simple. Tonight, he'll be talking about one of his favorite strategies, iterators. Please welcome my favorite polyglot, Eric Burton.
Good evening. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, it looks like you can. Great. Well, I'm going to follow Corey's incredibly useful and practical talk with some straight up nerd stuff. So let's get into it. We're going to fall in love with iterators tonight, either for the first time or maybe for the 100th time for some of you. Oh, let me go over to there we go. So first of all, let's start with an adorable picture of baby goats and some interest, right? What iterators? What are we talking about? Well, as I usually do when I have a question, I go to Google and I get the Wikipedia entry. And then I read it. And in this case, we see that iterators are an object that enables a programmer to traverse a container. And as also usually happens, I read that Wikipedia definition and I continue to go, I don't know what that means. So then I translate it into something that looks like human speech, which is an iterator is a computing construct. It holds state and produces values. You can loop over it. And if that doesn't help, let's get very concrete. So you're going to see some different languages in tonight's talk. This is Python. Who can spot, and we'll be interactive because I took some slides out to save time. So I'm going to have a chance for interactivity during this talk. Who can spot the iterator in this little code snippet?
You're in enhanced for loop, eh?
Do what?
I just said it's your enhanced for loop, right?
Right. It's numbers, right? It's that list of numbers. When you call for number in numbers, you're creating an iterator over that list of numbers. And that iterator holds some state. In this case, which number you're producing, and it produces values, the numbers in the list, right? So it's that simple. And we can get a little bit more complicated than that, but at its heart, that's what an iterator does. It holds some state and it produces values. So let's look at a few. So I went with 5 pretty popular programming languages. Most of these show up in your top 20 anytime you're looking. And they all support iteration to greater and lesser degrees. I've also picked 5 different iterator patterns that are very common. You see them in lots of places. And in the columns, we sort of have the different names. Now, the first one is enumerate. It's the enumerate pattern, and this is where you loop over some construct and you get not just the values, but you get the index of each value at the same time. So you get, in our list earlier, you would get index 0, value 1, index 1, value 2, if you remember what that list looked like. Don't get thrown off when you start. If you work with iterators, you'll notice that different languages call them different things. And so it's really a good idea to kind of get down at least some ideas of what the patterns are. So you can see a lot of languages agree on enumerate for this one. JavaScript is different. It has to use entries. And Java is even more different. I think this is actually a Java package to use zip with index. Now, the next 3 are super common, and that's probably why the name is the same. You've got your map, your filter, and your reduce. Right? A map is an iterator pattern that takes an iterator and transforms each value in some way, producing the transformed value. A filter iterates over a list of values, and some of them it will give you and some of them it will take away depending on criteria that you set. A reduce is going to iterate over some values and combine them all into one thing, one value, single value at the end. And an accumulate, which unfortunately I could not find representatives of in JavaScript or Java or even popular JavaScript or Java libraries. Those of you who are more familiar with those languages may just know that off the top of your head. An accumulate is like a reduce, except it produces the accumulated value each term. And you may hear this called an accumulate or a scan. Rust isn't necessarily the odd one out here. I think C++ calls it scan as well. But you can think about this one if you're doing like a cumulative sum, you're going to get the accumulated value each loop. So let's look at these, right? I like concrete things. I'm not a super smart person, so I like examples. So here we have a list of just random names that could have come from anywhere, and we've produced an enumerate on them, right? And so what do we expect to get out of this loop? What do we expect line 4 to produce for us?
Yes.
1,
0 through
0
5.
Dwight, 1 Pam.
There you go.
Yep.
2
1
Jim.
Dwight, 1 Pam, 2 Jim. Exactly.
3 Kathy. Yep.
Yep. Okay, here's the hard question. What state is this iterator keeping up with? We know that going over a list just keeps up with the index. What state do we think the enumerate is tracking as it goes down this list? It's a tricky
I don't
one.
know Python, but is it your array? The items in your array?
It's actually the same thing. It's the same thing as going over a regular list. It's just the index, right?
Index.
It's keeping up with the index and it's just giving it back to you each loop. That's all it does differently.
Okay.
There you go. So now that you guys know that I'm going to ask these each time, remember state, production. That's iterators. Okay, so mapping is like loops with transformations, right? So here we've got, we're doing some JavaScript for like the 90% of you who love JavaScript for some inexplicable reason. We're producing an array of numbers. And then in line 3, we're iterating over the mapped transformation of numbers. And we're passing it an anonymous function here. So this x arrow x times 2 is a JavaScript anonymous function that takes a value, multiplies it by 2. Okay, so what are we getting out of this loop?
I'm guessing if it's a 1, then it'll multiply by 2. If it's a 2, it'll multiply by 2.
Exactly right. 2,
Yep.
4, 6, 8, 10. Yeah, we're just doubling each of them. Okay, now the hard part. What is the state that this map iterator is keeping track of? It's 2 things this time. Yeah, y'all just stay off mute.
Is it the index and the value?
Yeah.
So it's keeping track of the index, and it's also keeping
The
the lambda,
Average.
the anonymous function.
Yep, the X, right?
That's it. Yeah, it's keeping that
Yeah.
function so that it can apply it each time. So that's the state. Absolutely. Okay, so here's Java, and I think you can all clearly see why I love Java so very much. It's because of how concise it is. Java, interestingly enough, has two different flavors of iterators. It has streams and iterables. So that's what's going on here. You can see on line 7, we're producing a list of integers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. On line 8, we're transforming that list of integers into a stream. So that's one of the types of iterators in Java. And then we are filtering that stream, and we're passing it another anonymous function. When you're doing a filter, the anonymous function has a special name. I don't know why. It just has a special name. A special name is called a predicate function, and a predicate is just a function that returns true or false. That's all it is. So we're passing in a predicate that is checking if that number is divisible by 2. And then in line 9, we are looping over that stream of integers, except you can't just like for loop over a stream of integers in Java, because that would be too easy and you're not earning your paycheck that way. So you have to convert it into an iterable of integers. So with all that explanation, any guess as to what we're going to print out in this snippet of code? Here's a hint. The variable names matter.
The even numbers.
The even numbers, right? We're going to filter the even numbers. And that's what we see, 2, 4, and 6. Okay. Not a trick question. What state are we keeping in this filter?
The even numbers.
So interestingly, the state in the filter is exactly the same as the state in the map. You're keeping up with the index.
Yeah.
You're keeping up with the function. The
Oh,
predicate.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all that's in there. I promise this will actually like matter later, but it's good to kind of be thinking about iterators in these terms. Okay, here's some Rust, which is clearly not the best language ever. Certainly, I would never say that. And here we have in line 2, we're creating a vector of numbers, which is just a fancy word for list. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And on line 3, we're taking those numbers, we're turning it into an iterator. So into iter. And then we're reducing that iterator, and we're passing it an anonymous function, which unfortunately doesn't have a fancy arrow. That's a downside to Rust. Interesting thing here, there are 2 values the function takes, right? The first value it takes is the it's ACC, so the variable names are not as helpful here as they might be, which is the accumulated value so far. And V is the next value. And what it's producing is it's just adding the current value to the accumulated value so far. And you can ignore that unwrap at the end. That's just some Rust nonsense. Any guess as to what this will produce? And it's a single value.
15.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're just summing the numbers.
Oh.
Watch out. See, drinking helps, right? Absolutely. Yeah. You trust yourself, right? You know more than you think you do a lot of times. So, okay. What's the state? There's 3 pieces of state this time. You know what the first 2 are already.
Index, value, and accumulator.
So the index, the function. Oh, well, let's do that the other way. The index, the function. And the last thing that we're keeping up is with the accumulated value, just like you said, right? That's in this, it knows from loop to loop how much it's accumulated so far. All right, the last one, this is some Julia, and Julia's actually really is a lot nicer to read than some of these others. We've got a list of numbers again, and we are looping over the accumulate of, we're passing it, that plus sign that we're passing it is really like the addition function represented by the plus sign. It does take two variables, right, and adds them together. So surprise, in case you hadn't figured it out yet, the plus sign in your programming language is a function that takes two arguments. So there's no magic in programming. So here we've got a function, takes two values, adds them together and produces it. All right. Any guess as to what we produce here?
Would it be 15 again?
Eventually, yes. So as I described it earlier, you know, the accumulate does the same thing as reduce, but it outputs the accumulated value each iteration. So this is like the cumulative sum. And just so I don't run us too far over time, I'll go ahead and tell you for free that the state we're keeping up with here is exactly the same as the reduce, right? We're just surfacing that accumulated value state back up on each loop. Okay, why did I painfully make us go through that exercise? Well, the answer is because iterator, you're not limited to just the iterators that your language or some fancy person who wrote a library provides you. You can roll your own. So I'm going to go through how to do that in Rust, just because I like confusing people. And also because I just happened to have this code lying around and didn't have to rewrite it. So the first thing I want to point out is in lines 1 through 4 here, this is the iterator. Okay, so I've been kind of hand waving up until this point, saying that, you know, an iterator is a thing that holds state and produces values. This is it. In Rust, a struct is like an object, right? Or a class. In Python, it's going to be a class. It's just a data structure. And inside this data structure, we're keeping up with two pieces of state. We're keeping up with the current value that we're run length encoding. By the way, does anybody, let me stop. I'm going to tell you what a run length encoding is. Run length encoding is if you've got a bunch of values in a list and some of them are repeated, it's going to give you back the values and how many times they're repeated in sequence, right? So if it's like 1 1 1 1 2 2, you'd get 3 1s 1 2, or 2 2s. If I can remember
like
what it's.
Simple compression algorithm. Yeah.
Yeah, compression, exactly. So we're going to keep up with the value that we're currently encoding, and in this case, it's an option. So we might not have a value. That's important. So, you know, you think like in JavaScript, you could just like put null or undefined there. Rust makes you be explicit about the fact that there might be a none value there. And the other thing we're keeping up with is we're actually just keeping up with another iterator. We're saying we can keep an iterator inside this run length encode iterator and just draw from its state, which is super handy. It's like cheating, but legally. So in Rust, when you want to implement some functionality for something, you write what's called an impl block. In this case, we're implementing the iterator trait for our run length encode iterator. This just tells the language that when we put it in a for loop, that it should work by calling this next function each time through the loop until it gets to nothing. We're defining inside our item, like what are we going to get out of each loop? So this is the value produced. And in this case, the value produced is a number. usize is a number. It's the count of how many we found. And then the T is a type. It's just going to be that value. So if it's like 1 1 1 2 2, then the first value is going to tell you how many ones, and the second value is the 1, right? So it's going to be 3 1. Then in our next function, and so different languages do this differently. They're usually called next, actually. The next function is the function that runs each iteration through the loop that produces the value. So again, up at the top, we've got our state, and I'm pointing at my screen like you can see me do that. Up at the top, you've got your state, and now we've got our value production. So here, we're checking to see if there is a value. The little question mark tells us that if there's not a value, to just return none, and that's going to let the iterator know that we're done, we're out of values. And then we start our count at 1. This is the first time we've seen that thing. Then we start a loop, and we actually are, each loop, we're calling the next method from the iterator that we're holding inside of us. So if it's just a list, we're just taking the next item from the list. And then if that next item matches the current value we're looking at, we increase our count by 1. If it's anything else, we say, okay, well, that's our next value. And then we break out of our loop and we give back the count and the value, right? So we're just traversing it. So we're just going to traverse the inside iterator up until the value changes and then give back the count and the current value that we were counting. And then we set the value for the next loop to be whatever that next value we found was, right? So we're just setting up that iterator to be able to produce the next value. And then this is just some more Rust nonsense where we are we're writing our own trait called run length encode that'll let us call the run length encode function. And when we call the run length encode function on some other iterator, it will take the next value out of that iterator. That's line 31. That's going to be our value inside our run length iter. And then we're just going to produce that structure with that value and with the iterator inside of it. Okay. So here's what that looks like in action. Here's how that code works. We've got a string of 3 A's, 2 B's, 4 C's, a D, and 3 E's. We are starting with our string. We're calling another iterate. We are converting that string into an iterator over the characters in that string with chars function. Then we're run length encoding that iterator, and then we're collecting it into a vector or a list. And so you will see that we get out exactly what we said we would. 3 A's, 2 B's, 4 C's, 1 D, and 3 E's. Now, here's the thing. And here's why this matters. Beyond the fact that like writing things that you can pass to a for loop is just cool and will get you so much developer cred. We care about this because there are a couple of benefits to using iterators in your code. One, it makes your code much more readable, right? Here we can see that on line 3, when we get the run length encoded characters, we take a string, we convert it to characters, we run length encode them, and then we collect it to a list. That's what we do. It moves from left to right. You read it just like you read a book. And then it's, it becomes very, very easy to follow what you're doing there. The other thing that it does is it makes your code more efficient. And so you can chain iterators forever. And when you chain iterators this way, that's called an iterator combinator. Again, another vocabulary word, don't be scared by it. Combinator just means things you can stick together, right? So you can stack iterator on iterator on iterator. You can go iterators all the way down, except it's less like a stack and it's actually more like an assembly line, right? Where the first station makes some transformation to the chassis of the car. The next station adds something to it. The next station changes the color. The next station installs the trim, and finally it rolls off the line. Iterators work the same way, where you're taking values and you're marching them through what is essentially an assembly line in code, and you've lined up what those steps are. Here's the other great thing about iterators. If you are using iterators judiciously, your code will be much, much, much more efficient. Take our assembly line model again. Imagine how many fewer cars this assembly line would make if after each step they needed to take the car off and move it onto a different line, right? You're introducing a lot of overhead and a lot of extra work on the workers. You do the same thing in your code when you produce a new list each time, right? So if you wanted to do this run length encoding like we did before and take it and create a list of characters, and then take that list of characters and run length encode that list of characters, you're actually introducing extra steps into your process you don't need to do. You can just pass those values from one iterator to the next. That makes your code faster, more efficient, and easier to read. And that is why I think everyone should love iterators. And I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Class is in session. Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Coriana, you've had your hand up for like 30 minutes. I'll go ahead and go to you.
Oh, yeah, I was trying to get it up for when you were displaying some of that code, the Rust one, just because I want to understand it. I was just curious, is the T and I representing a type or a variable?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I was trying to gloss over it just because like generics are
Yeah.
kind of painful, but in this case, right, all that these mean here, and I've actually, if you were a Rust programmer and you looked at this, you would laugh at me because this won't work. There are actually some like other bits that you have to add to make this work. This is just more readable.
Okay.
But in this case, the T represents some type of value.
Okay.
And so it could be numbers, it could be letters like we did before. It could be like objects, right? As long as those objects can be compared to one another to find out if they're equal or not for run length encoding. Yeah, it could be anything.
So it's basically like an any type.
Yeah, it's basically like an any
Okay.
type. And what I've left off of here, and it's one of the things I think makes Rust so neat, are the constraints that T has to support comparison with itself for
Okay.
equality. Yeah.
So that'd be like generic comparable types.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a generic, and you would just have to, you know, in the working code, you'd have to have those type constraints on
Right.
those. Yeah, and then the I, and the same thing for the I. I would have a type constraint that says I has to be
Okay.
anything that also is an iterator.
Okay.
Yeah.
The last one, when you talked about chaining, because that's something I always look into, especially when it comes to performance, especially coming from a JavaScript where sometimes it's good to cache the value to that way it doesn't have to kind of recalculate things. So I was kind of curious with the iterator as far as that, like, is it good practice to just chain versus to cache? That way it doesn't have to kind of recalculate some of that for performance. I know in JavaScript that is huge when it comes to chaining. You do want to think about performance and like how much performance or how long it's going to take to run that if it's got to execute a bunch of things down or pass things down to the next one. So I was just curious about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll get your best performance gains if if the list of things that you want to iterate over is very large, or if the individual things inside that list are very large. So if you've got like 10 numbers in a list, it's not going to really matter unless you're just doing it millions and millions of times. But then you're still not getting a whole lot out of iterator chaining. But if you're doing like 1,000 or 100,000 numbers, then your performance is going to be huge because you don't have to like create a space in memory to store what you just did to those 10, 100,000 numbers before you move on to the next step.
Okay.
And the same thing if you're doing it over like objects that are pretty large, right? That have a lot of data in them. You're saving yourself from having to like set aside space in memory, write them to write. You can just sort of keep them where they are. And that tends to speed up your code.
Nice. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. We're going to go to Karen and then Corey.
I just wanted to ask a question about the iterator combinator. So again, my primary language is Java and I barely touched on JavaScript and I don't know what, I know what Rust is, but is that kind of like an interface or nesting or like a factory kind of like a factory method?
For Java, it's streams.
Okay.
Yep.
I know streams.
It's just streams. And you know how like you can chain like stream methods one after the other. You can do it in a filter. That's all it is.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, don't you? I mean, you got to love how like different languages refer to the same idea with different words.
Super
that was part of
helpful.
the reason. Yeah, that was part of the reason I put the 5 in here, just to sort of show like these ideas aren't like new or special to any one language. But sometimes they do use like different vocabulary.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
And Corey.
I just wanted to straight call out the fact that you simplified your Rust example to make it shorter to the point that it won't work, and you added at least a dozen extra words to your Java example that no Java developer would ever go to the extent of doing.
I'm just going to point out that I'm not a Java developer.
We never knew that.
Yeah, I know, right?
Real. The hatred is real.
Man, that's throwing fire.
We'll do Mac versus Windows next, just not tonight.
Oh, yeah. Linux.
Can't argue. Man, good stuff as always, Eric. Thank you so much. And if you all like some more of Eric's goodness, join the Coding Dojo. He's one of our leaders, as well as Corey McCarthy over that every month. We'd love to have you. And Dennis. Dennis is here. Sorry, Dennis. I just saw you in the corner. He's one of our leaders of the Coding Dojo as well. Well, folks, we have made it to our last speaker of the evening, and he literally broke the bank with this bio. Hope I can get through all of it because my God, it's massive. Will Kelly is a 16-year software team builder and owner of Dev Grabber, a software-only agency and recruiting training company. That's it. That's what he's coming to get.
That's great. Hey, can y'all hear me?
Got you.
Yes.
Great, man. You sound great. You look great.
Great.
Oh man.
Cool. Hey, let me do some share screen action. I'm not very technical, so.
Damn, look at all those sneaks.
Y'all like that? Can y'all see that?
Sneakerhead.
All right. Yeah, a little bit.
Nice.
For sure. All right. So quick introduction for me. I've been doing this for 16 years. Okay. I think the first teams I built was like VB6, VBA. I own Dev Grabber. We do retained recruiting. The difference between that and normal recruiting is you got to pay me sizable fee to even work on your stuff. Because I have value just being a software guy. I'm 1,000% candidate first, and I will tell a client that to their face. I come through for them because I come through for y'all. Okay. Sales heavy urgency and advisor style recruiting. That's mostly for the clients. So they're not wasting my candidates' time and they're not wasting mine. All right. I've had a lot of success in agency and corporate recruiting. My corporate recruiting has been at software consulting companies. There's a company y'all should check out called Headstorm. Grew them from 15 to 100 engineers. I hope that's on my gravestone someday. Okay, so the good corporate stuff, I've done that at a high level in the agency. I've been $1 million biller and all that stuff. Recruiting and training in software is my only focus, and I will get into heaven because I'm advancing careers. Nothing gets me more excited. All right, so let's get into this. I'm glad to be the caboose on this bus. We're going to talk about the top 5 musts for your interview code demo. Okay, so if you're a JC, if you're a Corey, and you probably have to give code demos as part of your job, this ain't for y'all. All right, if you're a senior sales engineer into it, you can clock out. I'll see you later. Okay, this is for junior level developers that aren't accustomed to sharing off a portfolio of work as part of the interview process. And it's for also engineers that maybe they don't have to do code demos, and this is kind of alien to them. Okay, Backstreet Boys, One Love, greatest group of 5 ever assembled. All right, I see all the old people like, yeah, all right, I think I like this guy. So let's get into it. Number 1, and this is from experience. Okay, I don't build apps, but I write pilots, I do stand-up comedy, I have a lot of projects-based stuff, and you want to build something that has purpose to you. Okay, but you don't want to overthink it. All right, y'all, it does not have to be the next Uber. I want you to keep in mind that, you're not going to really, get the job with this crazy, amazing idea that you're going to sell for $1 billion on the side. Okay, so this is very much showcasing your programmability. So don't worry about that fat bag of VC cash that's on the line right now, because this is really about you showcasing what you need as a software developer. Below, these are few of the examples that I've heard during my career that I really liked, okay, that made some waves for me. I had a candidate that built some an insulin tracker on some fire pads for his young kids. All right, I had a JavaScript queen. I've placed her 1 million times. She built a Connect 4 game to connect with her grandpa over COVID. They used to play COVID live, one-on-one, at a Whataburger every other weekend. All right, and that was taken from her. Okay, live reggae music finder. This is something that I use. I stole it from a candidate 2 years ago that was like, how do I find that live reggae beat in my area? Okay, so long story short, because you also want to be able to finish it, and when you're demonstrating something, you want to have a little fire. So doesn't have to solve the world, doesn't have to be sending rocket biology, but make sure it's got something that's got some meaning to you. Okay, even if it's something as simple as a game. All right. This is another big one too. Improved version of an existing app, especially one that people are familiar with and might know the shortcomings. That's also great too. Okay. So number 1, nail down something that you actually give a shit about. Okay. Number 2. All right. Know your user and what they need. All right. These slides are generated by questions that hiring managers both business functional and technical, ask candidates while they're doing code demos, okay? And I'm not sure if y'all have been told this, but this is very much an analyst job too. All right, if you're a senior engineer, you're probably nodding your head right now. So building a good user story, being able to talk about, hey, this is who my app is for, it's super important, okay, especially during the interview process. So we're gonna go back to the examples that I gave you. The insulin tracker. My users are grubby little kids with no attention span. Okay, this particular group of kids, they really needed STEM to engage. Okay, so my candidate had like wonderful colors, he had haptic response, he had audio stuff to get his kids into it. Okay, they were equipment hazards. That's why he used fire pads, because they're basically Amazon pads. I think they're like, you know, 10 for $1 now. And his kids were destroying that stuff left and right. Forgetful, easily bored. All right. So these are the criteria that you need to be able to talk about. Grandpa was really simple. Her grandpa was a grandpa. He had trouble seeing. He was tech ignorant. He had arthritis. He was a legacy tech user. I think he was using old Android devices. And I think he was using like IE browsers. He loved old-timey carnival type stuff. That step right up, you know, kind of old-timey carnival shit. So she kind of built that around that theme. And he was a big-time shit talker. So as her and her grandpa played Connect 4, they would bury each other as they won. Okay. And so she wanted to make sure there was kind of a text back and forth component as well. All right. The reggae fan, they love live music. They got a disposable income. They're very app savvy. They want to share their activity on social media. Okay. So you don't need to know their entire bio, but if someone asks you, hey, Karen, who's this app for? Why are you building this? You want to be able to rattle off something. Okay. Number 3, and this is important for y'all especially, and I think this is something that this group is gonna like. I love this talk tonight because y'all are talking about choices and why would I use this framework and this framework's better and F you, this framework's better, and like, fight. This is funny. As a recruiter, I always stand back because it gets so political. But one of the things that you are gonna need to talk about usually during an interview, and I would say it's not gonna be me or any like, you know, 5-year-old like brain HR person. It's probably going to be someone like a Corey or a JC. They're going to ask you about the choices you made building your app. In particular, they're going to ask you about platform and then specific tech languages and frameworks. Okay, so yeah, I chose web mobile, so my stuff can work on any browser. I chose native mobile because 100% of my focus is on phone experience. I'm in the desktop world, so I built a Chrome plugin because that's where it's at. My stuff's primarily for desktop use. You know, we chose the cloud. That's a good question, Corey, because I didn't want to deal with on-prem stuff, and I want to avoid any sort of infrastructure work that I'm keen on. All right, I sound British there. Oh, that I'm keen on. I don't like the pipes. Don't like the network stuff. I chose React because it runs on lots of stuff and has a great developer experience. Or plot twist, I chose React because it's just the most marketable skill right now and I like money. Okay. Like your app idea, which doesn't have to rock the world, neither does you have to have that reason for using a technology. All right. When I was at Headstorm, we asked this dude, hey, why did you choose React? And he said, well, to be honest, and he kind of put his glasses on, there are previous versions of React and other spot frameworks that are better. There's stuff coming out that kills React, but the world wants React, so React is what you get. Here's my React app. And we were like, cool, all right. And one of the guys in the back was like, hell yeah, brother. You know, so it can be something as simple as that. All right. If you built something in vanilla JavaScript, number one, props to you. It's one of the things I ask as a software specialty recruiter is, do you know like the bare bones? Yeah, I wrote it in JS well because I wanted to show off my web fundamentals. You know, hey, good question, Coriano. I actually wrote this in Scala because Scala utilizes my strong Java and JVM skills. Okay, well, Corey actually chose MySQL for my backend because I learned a crap load of SQL that I never knew I was going to ever need again for my old job. Okay, and it could also be something that's just something completely different. I chose Erlang because I know the engineering manager is a functional programming fiend, and this is a total flex. All right, so whatever the reason, just kind of have one and know why you've made these choices as far as what you're building. Number 4, what was the process behind building your app and who was involved? And who was involved? This is actually something I didn't talk about at the beginning of this talk. If for any reason at all, this is an area of the stack that you're blind to, or maybe you don't give a crap about it, or maybe there's just not enough time in the day to, be a wife and a mother and a sister and a developer. So you're focusing on one UI thing, but you want to have a whole app to show off. All right. That's a good time to partner up. And I could tell you, you're going to be building stuff with other devs for the rest of your life. So the earlier you start, the better. All right. These are questions that I hear during an interview that usually people get peppered with as far as, why they did what they did. Where did you start and why? Hey, I started with the back end because I suck at it and I wanted to get it out of the way. That's a great answer. I'll take that. How was your work delegated if you're on a team? Okay. Did you follow any particular methodology? That might be something else that you choose to show off. Hey, Corey, I'm showing off my application that does some crop forecasting for the agro industry, and we used Agile Kanban to get it done. Okay. How did you prioritize features? How many versions did you build? All right. How did you decide on a deadline? What kind of collaboration apps were used? What was your tool set as far as how you guys orchestrated what y'all did? How were design decisions made? You can now add PM to your growing skill set, because that's really one of the fundamental duties, about actually coming together, especially if you decide to build something with somebody else. Okay. Keep on trucking. All right. Number 5. All right. You're ready to go. Okay. Congratulations. This is something that, I feel, even as a non-coder, when I finish a project, you should be happy. You should be proud. I've heard a ton of demos. All right. I actually volunteer for the SMU Data Science College, and I go to all their fairs and stuff. So I've heard a lot of them. So number 1, you want to get hype and you want to get up and get excited to demonstrate what you worked so hard to build. Okay. Before that, this is something you always want to do. Don't grab me. I can't help you. If I wrote a line of HTML, the earth would fall off its axis. Okay. Grab some senior engineers in your network and ask about their experiences giving great code demos. All right. Product consulting backgrounds, they're going to have a million levels to speak on, from, hey, you're demoing to this person that knows nothing, to you're demoing to another architect. All right. Number 2, do as many practice demos with friends and family as you can without hurting your relationship. Okay. Without driving them out of the house. All right. Repetition is your friend. When I'm pitching, when I'm doing something like this, like my wife knows this whole pitch because I did it probably like 5 times through today. All right. I always get be prepared to go over the web and in-person demos. We're getting back to some hybrid stuff. We're getting back to some like, hey, we are doing this next round of interviews, Corey, in person. So you always want to be able to represent over Zoom, over the interwebs, and on-prem over your laptop, and have the equipment, batteries charged, and just the toolkit ready to do that. All right. Get a good night's sleep if you have an interview and you're going to be doing a demo. All right. That's important. Wear something that inspires you. Okay. I'm not old school. Coat and tie. Great. Crisp tee of your favorite band. Awesome. Batgirl suit. I have 3. Okay. So whatever gets you jacked up, you want to look good and feel that part. All right. Make sure your tone remains conversational. If you get a little too amped, I'm having this problem right now. All right. And I've been speaking for a long time. So keep it conversational. My wife is a yogi, and she practices women's wellness. She's always probably texting me right now, don't forget to breathe. Okay. So that stuff's important. And also when you are wrapping up, 9 times out of 10, people are going to ask you, all right, hey, Corey, what changes would you make to your app right now? All right. Any specific areas, or, hey, is there anything you really kind of, didn't do right? Is there anything that needs fixing or performance improvement? Because every boss you will ever have, and I know the seniors can attest to this, are going to want to know what is the next step. And then most importantly, smile and have fun. All right, y'all, those are my slides. What questions do we have?
No, turn your mics on. Turn your mics on right now. All 20 out of you. Let's hear it. Make noise. Act silly. This is a wrap. We're wrapping this thing up. We went out with a bang. William, thank you.
Absolutely, y'all.
I'm up here taking pictures of my screen, knowing I can just ask you for the slides, but it's okay.
Hey, real quick before we get into questions, everybody reach out to me over LinkedIn. I know I've worked with you. I know
Already did.
like Nick, I've worked with a few people. I like to do usually like a 30 to 45 minute, you know, kind of just introduction and hey, here's, you know, tell me the state of the union on your career. Here's why your LinkedIn, you know, profile sucks. Here's how you could finish it. I will be direct. Y'all have coding. I have copy. I do stand-up comedy. I write screenplays. I'm very good about making sure you can articulate your voice. All right. I'll do mock interviews. I can introduce you to people. And overall, I just really, really want to help. It's something that I take very seriously. So.
We appreciate that greatly. And we will go right into questions and comments, maybe up to 4 or so, give or take. We're not going to push it. It is 8:40. We've been going for 2 hours and 10 minutes, believe it or not. So, Coriano.
Yeah,
Victoria
yeah.
with your hand up. Go for it.
Awesome. So first of all, I love the energy. I'm a thespian myself, so love performing. Did that for years. Yeah, the question I have for you is because it came from a conversation I had with someone else where it was about looking, I think it was, yeah, they were a UX designer, but they were, I guess the role was also asking for some experience in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And so the big question was why? Like, why do I need to know coding if I'm going to be, you know, for a UI design role? So it got me really interesting to kind of start looking where I'm seeing a lot of roles where it's hybrid, where a front-end developer, it's a UI developer role, but then in the requirements, it says experience working with Postgres or MongoDB. And so it just kind of caught my attention where I was like, you know what, I kind of get what you're saying where, okay, maybe you're not interested in a coding, but you just like the UI design, which is a separate role. But that was something that I kind of wanted to ask you that because that was a question I brought up because I didn't know how to answer that as far as like whether you should not, you know, apply for that role or you should apply for it, or you should go and learn some HTML or something like that too. So.
For sure. That's a really good question. And so like, I made my career, okay, in sales, in picking up the job before I filled it, before I even really learned recruiting. And I did so well because I had this friend that's 2 words, and that's the percentage breakdown. Okay. I beg you guys to use this when you're talking to a recruiter or an HR person. It's like, well, it's some design and some code behind it, and some back end and woo, full stacky. All right. Put the brakes on, sister. Okay. Give me a percentage breakdown between the UX design and the code behind the design. Okay, well, it's 30-70. It's a must. You got to have this, you know, but it is coding heavy. So it might be something where they want to have their cake and eat it too. And they're like, yeah, I would love to find a UI developer, a JavaScript engineer with great design chops. Okay. It might be because I got a small company and I need it. We're working with C# and backend engineers and Azure folks. We don't want them near the UI. Okay, so it might be something that it's necessary. It might be something where I'm just trying to have my cake and eat it too. You know, but overall, especially guys, when you get into like just any part of the stack, even if it's just UI, middle, back end, I always ask them, hey, and if you don't know this, Mr. Recruiter, I ain't mad at you. All right, what's the percentage breakdown between this, you know, JavaScript and React, C# and Azure? Okay, what does that really look like? All right, and that's on you because it can't be on all the HR and recruiters because a lot of them don't know and a lot of them don't care and a lot of them don't know to ask the questions that I do.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Awesome, man. Good question too.
Other questions for Will? See any hands? I can't believe it. You guys better take advantage of this opportunity. He may up and move to Japan next week. He seems like the kind of guy that would do it. It wouldn't even be a thing. They're like, sell everything. We're out of here. So you better take advantage. Get those hands up. I know I have one, but I want to give my guests first opportunity. JC, go for it, man. Oh, and no, I'm sorry, Eric. Eric, your hand is blending into the painting. Sorry about that. Go for it. Eric's next.
I have a semi-unserious question. So Will, I took your advice. I looked you up on LinkedIn. I'm looking at your banner here. There's a big R in the middle of it. Would you help me and share with everyone just like how great of a programming language R is and how that's super in demand?
Oh, sorry, I'm muted.
You know, it's funny, man. It's like JavaScript frameworks are like rap music. Like it comes and goes. You know, I like I can never speak to the actionability or like, hey, this is why you're going to use this. I can only ever speak to market. But yeah, ours hot, man. Especially on the especially when you're really getting into like our products are data focused. That's something that you really want to know. Also, another line that I draw in the sand is between app engineering and data engineering. A lot of people don't know it's different things, So, when you're looking at just straight up data engineering, there's going to be all kinds of different tool sets and languages and frameworks that you might not ever touch because you're just an app person.
Very cool. Thank you, sir.
Yes, man. Awesome.
JC, go ahead, man.
Okay, it's not a tech question, but maybe I'm just not nosing, but is there a lot of shoes behind you?
Those would be a lot of shoes. Yeah. That's probably my only vice. I'm not a crack addict. I don't have a gambling addiction or anything like that. So yeah, I've got mostly Jordans. I like Air Max because I ran in college. And the smart part is this over here. Okay, that's my wife's side. All right, because if one shoebox shows up, is this your shoebox? But if two shows up, it's like, hey, our shoes are here. So that works out well. That works out well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely, man.
And I guess I'll take the last one, William. I was on a Twitter space just a couple of nights ago, and I was sharing with people that I've seen around a lot that were still kind of that junior developer state, that the advice we gave 3 or 4 years ago is different now. It's just a different market, purely in terms of the number of applicants going per job and the types of jobs they're going for. Any suggestions for a person who's just coming through the boot camp, just coming out of college, just wrapping up self-study, and they're emerging into this market with people leaving Google and Facebook and Meta and Amazon, and then coming to even local towns now and flooding these markets? Or how do you make yourself competitive? How do you stand out? What can people do? Is there hope? I know there is, but what are your suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, number one, and a few people talked about it. I think it was Richard that started us off, and he said something smart, like, it's really not about the site you give them to, it's about your portfolio. We all know that. And that's absolutely true. Okay. I work with LGBTQ people. I work with pan people. I work with sexually androgynous people. I work with African Americans, Nigerians. All right. The compiler doesn't care. All right. So it's your chance to represent. And at the end of the day, like, your app's going to speak. Okay. So if you're in an area of a stack, like, JavaScript and React, you want to have a portfolio that represents that. And that could be one app. Okay. Big picture, LinkedIn is where it's at. It's not going anywhere. And you've got to be a social predator about jobs you want. Okay. You've got to follow the companies that you want to work at. You've got to follow the hiring managers and engineering managers that you dig. Okay. Because you are one social media interaction away from a warm introduction. All right. I'm going to give you a quick story. We know I'm a sneaker nut. Okay. So the other day, I'm like, hey, I'm going to manifest my new clients. And I use this application called Trade Block. All right. Trade Block is an e-commerce app where you can trade sneakers straight up. All right. It's got a suggestion engine that's killer, like the images and stuff. It loads fast. And I spend so much time on it, my wife gets mad. So I sent them a LinkedIn. I'm like, hey, y'all. All right. I had a great experience on your app. If you're a first-time user of Trade Block, here's some secrets if you're a user. All right. The next day, the director of talent acquisition sent me a screenshot. He's like, dude, we're talking about you in Slack right now. Okay. So get amongst it. All right. If there's specifically some clients or some areas, that are in your region that you really admire, you got to follow the companies and the leaders that work there on the HR side and on the engineering side and mix it up with them. Okay. Because it's so much easier to be like, oh, is that Coriano? Why does that name sound familiar, Barbara? Oh man, we've been mixing it up over here. And like, he's been commenting on that. It's like, oh yeah, move him to the head of the line. And that's all it takes with us. Be memorable any way you can. Just keep it legal.
I heard Gary Vee say the very same thing. Like, if you want to get in touch with somebody, don't just reply to their tweets. Like, figure out, what their thing is, their team, their brands, whatever it is that they're about. Get in, where they're talking about it and contribute to the conversation and actually engage.
Yeah.
Like networking on a deeper level than just, hey, I like your stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And y'all, I know it's hard, you know, but don't idolize anyone. Okay. They're one layoff away from not having a job. All right. It is what it is. Okay. So, you know, I idolize the people that remove barriers for other people that are doing good in the industry. I work hard with ignorant recruiters to make them less ignorant, because we do more deals and make money, which is what the industry cares about. And y'all get treated better. You know, I mean, you have the opportunity to showcase this portfolio of work. Okay. I can't really do that. I can show you numbers as a recruiter or tell you my story or talk my way into a job, but coding is demonstratable, and that's pretty special.
So I do have a
Good.
question. I mean, if
Yeah, go ahead.
It's Lawrence. I know we
Kind of quick, man. Kind of quick.
Okay.
Let's respect our guests. It's almost 9
Yes.
o'clock.
Oh man, I'm good.
Yeah, so with because I think it's one that JC had me listen to, one recruiter. And so I guess the question is, it's moving away from just your resume and it's more about your brand and your being active versus having a resume that's solid. Like, here's my resume. Because, you know, before you could just give the resume and you move forward. But now, from like I said, those talks, it just seems like it's going away from just having a resume to actually like having some type of brand and people being able to, I guess, learn about you through that way versus through your resume or even through just your GitHub, stuff like that. So, okay.
Yeah, and that's you can thank millennials, you can thank like our attention span as Americans, you can thank the market that we had where like everybody was employed, and it's just like, yeah, you want my resume? I don't think so. I don't have time for that shit. And it's like, no, just talk to us. Oh, LinkedIn is cool. And all of a sudden LinkedIn PDFs are cool. You know, like I make my money because I build bespoke profiles that hiring managers flip out about. Okay. So it's really, you know, it's about the sum of all, you know, versus like just that resume. And like, no one likes writing them anyway, you know, but at the same time, you got to be a dad, you got to be like a wife, you got to be a brother, you got, you know, you've got elderly parents to take care of, you're going on vacation. So it's really tough. It's a full-time job looking for work.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hey, I want to give a quick shout. I don't know if anybody else can pop this out, but if you want to know branding, I want all y'all to go find Lawrence on Twitter and TikTok and go see all these spaces that he's in and the gems he's dropping in TikTok and on the lives. You want to see a brand? Lawrence Lockhart right here is putting his brand across the socials while being a full-time developer. And I guarantee you that the next time that he cares to have a job, he could be like, oh, well, I've got this TikTok, I got this Twitter, I've been in these spaces, I've been to these conferences, chatting with these people. And like, if you don't put yourself out there, if you don't enter the conversation, none of those people know who you are. And I'm totally jealous you got to go chill with Corey Weathers and all them folks at Pluralsight. Good stuff, man.
It's also, and Corey, Lawrence didn't do that overnight, I'm sure. Okay. It's a constant garden, this social media, this thing, like you've got to, you know, and if you just do one shovel a day, like, hey, clap it up, you know, I mean, it's just, it happens organically. It happens organically if you want it to happen naturally. You know, anyone can go out there and buy 50,000 Twitter followers from North Korea, but that's not going to help you get a job.
Absolutely love that. Will, thank you for your time, your energy, man. And just shot a connection request.
Hey,
through,
anytime, y'all. Anytime, y'all. I got
I'm
a
sure
million
there's
of
20
these.
of them there, but I appreciate you all. Guys, we are done. Guys, gals, friends, we are done. That is a wrap. That was an amazing, amazing meetup. Thank you, Corey, for that shout out. And let me just say very quickly, self-plug, because of continually putting myself out there and doing the things that I do, I will be joining the VS Code team from Microsoft on a live stream tomorrow at 5 p.m. Central on TikTok. So I don't know what we're going to talk about. They haven't given me any questions, so I better get my tongue ready and drink my caffeine because it'll be live, and that'll be really exciting. That being said, last two things that we're out of here. There's tons of LinkedIn URLs in the chat. If you need to connect with someone, you do, click on them, send an invite, quick, put a little note. Hey, we were in the meeting together. So they know who you are. They don't think you're just some random person off the street trying to be nefarious. Put a little note in there and connect with them. And the second thing, I would love to do a quick quick picture of just a screenshot. If you want to turn on your cameras, great. If you prefer not to, it's still okay. We'll see your name. We'll put this out on our socials. So I give everybody like 15 seconds if you want to just, get yourself together a little bit. Corey always does the crazy faces. Yeah. His energy rivals William sometimes. And again, if you don't want to turn on your camera, perfectly fine, not a requirement at all. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, looking at your camera. Wait. All right, cool. Got it. Oh, I'm looking away. I look ridiculous. That's okay. Don't worry about it. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Our next meetup will be the first Saturday in May.
I think that's the Friday one. Cornell, we're doing a Friday one.
I got Vito.
Yes. So I didn't want to take. I was just going to plug it in the chat because we're trying to get off. But UX Bikes, I was able to have the time, so I'm going to have that host event this Friday. So I'm looking forward to connecting and chatting about that too. And I was going to ask
this Friday on Zoom. What time?
It's 11:30 Central Standard Time.
11:30 Central. So kind of a lunch meetup. Come learn about UI, UX, and some design stuff with Coriano because that's his jam. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Hope to see you at the next one.
Yeah,
Jump
I'm
on
gonna have
Slack.
JC post it. Thanks.
That's a wrap. Longest goodbye ever. Good night.
I know. See you guys. Have a good night.
Later.